So, just a quick background. I'm in my last semester of my executive leadership MSN and at University of Memphis. And my graduation in May could not come quick enough. It's been a great experience. And this is the project that is the conclusion of my leadership practicum for this semester. And so it's interesting in our careers as healthcare providers, how we end up finding our calling or sort of our path at various different times. And that has certainly proven true through this journey through the executive program. And I, in my work as a clinical educator, have a sort of a unique perspective because I encounter all new hires, lots of new graduates. I'm also a facilitator for the nurse residency program that we have in our organization. And I have become sort of painfully aware of as sort of the state of our profession through hard conversations and hard situations with not just new graduates, but I think our nurses in general. So that has kind of led me down this path. So let me get started on this presentation. I call it preserving our profession. We obviously, turnover in nursing is something that is difficult for all institutions across the country and the world. And that's true here too. And I have really come to believe that part of the problem with turnover is one that we perpetuate ourselves. And because of various aspects that I'll get into, but really it all comes down to what I really believe is a term called moral injury, which is not a new term. We'll talk about it some more. There we go. Okay, so when we talk about moral injury, it's not a unique term. It's not one that isn't, sort of known. However, in the healthcare field, it's called a lot of different things. And you read different articles and studies, and they talk about emotional exhaustion, they talk about compassion fatigue, psychological injury, moral betrayal, trauma, all of those things, right? And then the most common word that we hear is burnout. I mean, we hear burnout all the time. And I think that burnout is a word that's probably overused and misused. And I'll tell you why I think that. The term burnout is a lot of people in healthcare, we use it because it's very common, and it's people know what we're talking about when we say it. But the thing about it is it really speaks to what am I trying to say? It degrades us. It sort of tells us that you're resilient. You don't have any resilience. And in fact, in healthcare and as nurses especially, that's one of our greatest strengths, I think, is resilience. And so what I really believe is that if a provider gets to the point where they are burnt out, then they really have endured so much moral injury that it's led to sort of an end stage moral injury. So what is it? Lots of different definitions of moral injury. The best summary is that which occurs because of repeated violation of deeply held moral beliefs. And we've all experienced this. Every healthcare provider has experienced this. It's not natural to watch someone die. It's not natural to try to save a life and not be successful. It's not natural to try to save a life that shouldn't be saved. And those are all hard things for us to sort of handle. And so I use the two words that I learned when I was in nursing school. Hey, Austin. So the non-malfeasance, so first do no harm, and then the beneficence concept of doing the most good.
There are people on the call. I think we are being.
So I'm showing you these statistics. They are old. I put the references there. And in research and academia, it's frowned upon to use especially old data. But I did it for a reason. Because if you look at these statistics from 2007 and 2002, and you fast forward to 2021, these statistics have not gotten better, and they were already bad then. So they're worse now. And that is alarming to me, that we have not figured out what the root issue is here and have not uprooted it somehow. In fact, I would go out on a limb and say contributing to it inadvertently, right? So we do lots of implementing various procedures and policies and government stated things that actually make these things harder for us and contribute to these types of statistics. So that is why I put those in there. They're old, so if it was bad then, it's worse now. That's the point. So let's talk about the financial implications of moral injury. The first one is probably the most obvious, is turnover, because that's what I'm talking about. So the average hospital turnover rate in the US, this is a 2020 statistic, is 15.9%. Replacing one RN due to turnover costs $44,000-ish. And so annually, we're looking at nearly $5 million for an institution. That's crazy high. Again, our reality. So turnover, very expensive. Another implication is patient outcomes, right? So we're all about patient outcomes, patient safety, but there is a ton of research out there that absolutely says that a nurse's perceived job satisfaction coincides with outcomes and quality. And so, in other words, if I don't have good job satisfaction and I'm unhappy in my work, I am more likely to provide less than excellent care, and my patients are more likely to give poorer quality scores. And then we talk about associate health, so time off. Mental health is as real as physical health. And when we endure moral injury without anyone helping us through that or having the tools to work through that, that becomes mentally scarring and injurious to us. And so the frequency of mental sick leave is congruent with the presence of moral injury. So this is all of our story. This is not an only nursing problem, right? So this is an old nurse. You're an old nurse. This is your story. Nurses that work with adults, nurses that work with pediatrics, physicians, therapists, and new graduates. So I said at the beginning, I work very closely. I have a very unique perspective with working with new graduate nurses, both in the orientation aspect as well as in the nurse residency program. And it's through the conversations with them where I really became so aware of what a critical place our profession is in. And a very high percentage, well, higher than is acceptable, of new graduate nurses will leave the profession within the first 3 years. That is a huge aspect of what we're dealing with. It's not just that they're leaving their jobs, they're actually leaving the profession. And so it's part of this cycle. So one of the handout that's on the table, I just copied this slide. So I made this cycle, this diagram, as part of a paper that I'm writing as a literature review on this subject matter here. So when you look at this and you see that every arrow is actually pointing back to intent to leave and turnover. And in the circles, you have moral injury, likelihood of patient harm, and a nursing shortage. This is not an exhaustive list. There are other things that are contributors to this. However, when we talk about moral injury, we're talking about failing to prevent harm, the inability to do the most good, and a violation of your moral values. And you see that this arrow goes back and forth, because when you have, if you harm a patient through an inadvertent mistake, that is moral injury. None of us want to hurt our patients. That is not what we're here to do. But why might errors occur? Errors occur because we are exhausted. The patient complexity has increased so much. So we're taking care of much sicker patients in lower acuity areas. Our ratios, our nurse to patient ratios are, always on the table for discussion. And then we have, our inexperience. Personally, and Amber can attest to this, our units, CVICU in the 9th floor, are about 90% newish graduates within the first 3 years. That lack of experience is a contributor, and to no fault of the nurse themselves, right? It is what it is. And then we talk about the nursing shortage. We have a huge percentage of nurses that are retiring. It's just what's happening. And Robin's, can attest to that. So we're seeing our most veteran nurses leave the profession naturally, as they should. They put their time in. The problem is that we do not have an equal number of nursing students or graduates to replace them. And there are various things that go into that, one of them being a terrible faculty shortage. And so that's a problem. So you have the nursing shortage, which, then contributes to all of these things too. So burnout in healthcare has been discussed since at least 1974, when they really only called it burnout. The most common associations that we see with this, long work hours, poor staffing, lack of resources, lack of support. So those are your easy ones, right? Those are the ones that are like, if we're going to talk about it, that's probably what we're ended up talking about. All of these, by the way, contributors to moral injury. So the evidence is there that those common things contribute. But the less common associations are things like errors, medical errors, ethical dilemmas, poor outcomes, second victim syndrome. I spend a lot of time, when we have the orientation. So I do some of the teaching during the new associate or new nurse orientation. And one of the things that I always tell new graduates especially is, you're going to make a mistake. We're human. Mistakes are going to happen. But I always tell them, find your person. Don't endure that because it's part of the job, right? None of these things on this less common list are just part of the job. And we can't operate effectively long-term if we just keep enduring these things without having somewhere to process that. So when we address it, there are many survey tools that have been created, not just for, really not specifically for healthcare. Many of these, actually, most of these surveys, and there are more than this, originate with the military, so with veterans. And so then healthcare takes them and says, how can we make them applicable to us, which is effective. But there are so many that it becomes a little like overwhelming and cumbersome, like how am I supposed to use this information at this point? So if we did have a result, right? So we used one of those or two of those scales and surveys, now we have results. So what are we doing with them? There's so much literature out there that basically is just saying, yeah, we have a survey tool and this is what we found out. Very little saying, but here's what we're doing about it. So, that's a very long conversation that I'm happy to have with anybody because I have lots of feelings about it. EAP, I'm a fan of EAP. I think it's a great opportunity that our organization gives. I will never say don't use it. I do think that there's a caveat. I have a caveat for this. If Amber and I are working together at the bedside and we code a patient and the patient doesn't survive and it was unexpected and we are devastated from that. Me going and sitting with an EAP clinical psychologist will never meet the need that I have because they weren't there with me when I tried to save that patient and failed. Amber understands though, we have a connection that is unique. No one else has that except the team that was there. And so EAP is a great thing. They're very useful for many things. They miss that there's something missing for this specific addressing of moral injury. Okay, so sick leave, we've already talked about that. This is expensive for the organization. And then we have emergency meetings. Austin can attest to this. We did this at CVICU very recently because we just saw what was happening with our providers and they needed a place to process. And the unfortunate thing about that, it was reactive instead of proactive. And it was useful. There was a lot of good that came from it, but I think that being more proactive is where we need to start thinking. And then there's peer support, and that's really where we're going with this. I believe this, our greatest asset toward addressing moral injury may be each other. So Johns Hopkins has a program that they created and that they run called Resilience in Stressful Events. It is a peer support program. It is my understanding, and it's a brief understanding, obviously, is that it really, there's, it's a great program. I don't know very much about it. However, I think that it really speaks more to the second victim syndrome. And then there's another program that I have come across. I know there's many more. Mind Body Strong, which is really a opportunity for new graduates to debrief and have that time to just talk, and have that peer-to-peer opportunity. But again, there's many more. So where I'm going with this, I really believe my life's work from here forward has to include something around this. I would love to see us implement a program using trained healthcare providers in an evidence-based method of addressing moral injury so that we're being more proactive and less reactive. I think it would be useful to develop a single survey tool, which includes the measures of key symptoms that lead to turnover among all of us. That is a link to the RISE program training. I put that there more for me than anybody else because I didn't want to lose the link. And there's my resources. So what questions do you have for me?
In all of your research, many articles that you read until wee hours in the morning.
Yeah.
Was there any overwhelming recommendation or any facilities that had implemented the mandate that nurses have to start out in med surg before they can go to critical care as a way of helping that entry into the profession?
That's a great question, and no, because my research is so focused,
All the in. Not the-
yeah, right, and so I didn't have, but as we explore this and we try to really uproot the problem, I think that we have to start looking at those types of things, like, is throwing a new grad into CVICU, helpful or
Right.
not? I mean, we have great success with, many of our new graduates in CVICU, but it's a struggle, it's a rough road. And so, yeah, sure. I mean,
Well,
it's
y'all
a-
almost have a perfect research opportunity of, you're going to be hired for CV, but for your first 18 months, you're going to work CCU while we cross-train you.
it's a great model. I mean,
And where they may decide to stay in CCU, even though they thought they wanted CVI, you almost can.
Mhm.
I go back on it because when I was hired as a baby nurse, I was hired into a NICU, but I had to work the first 6 months in well baby nursery.
Mm.
That was the program they had,
Yeah,
was you had to learn how to take care of well babies, and you had to learn how to be a nurse, and you had to develop, adapt to the profession before they would put you on the critical care side.
it's good.
And I've always thought that was such a great foundation, but then again, I came from a diploma program,
Mhm.
hospital-based nursing, and that was the bookmark, and they did the same thing for all the other critical cares. You
Yeah.
had to work med surg before you could go to critical care.
Yeah,
I don't know.
it's interesting.
Dr. Richardson's got a question.
I think that's so valuable to think back to models that worked and models that we've seen good evidence from. I think a secondary problem is perhaps the support on any floor in any unit, on any shift. I think you need that leveling of people who have some intellectual capital. They've been there, they understand, they have resources in their head
Yeah,
that they can draw to, and have them there. I think even if you took everybody and put them in the unit where they're going to see, hopefully, the least sick patient, they still could have a crisis.
right.
And without a team there supporting them, someone to call on, then they're going to take it personally that it was only them and only their fault. And so it's that balance. It's probably using Robin's idea plus having maybe those senior nurses who are retiring, who are leaving, can be retained. I've seen some literature surrounding using them as support, not necessarily patient care support,
Yeah.
but support in other ways.
Yeah, I've read some of that as well. Mhm.
Probably expensive, but still, if you can retain somebody's psyche, if you can retain them, those who I know over the last year, I've seen a lot of reports of nurses leaving, are broken. They're sad and they think that they were wrong and they think that they weren't good enough. And that's why they're leaving the profession. And without having a program to go back and capture them, maybe not to keep them in nursing, maybe it wasn't the right profession, but finding them and helping them recover from that, I think is huge.
Yeah. Yeah.
Dr. Richardson, if I can remind you, you actually helped save a nurse that had issues in personal life
Mm.
and was in critical care. And she came to work in your unit until she got her nursing feet back under her, and then she went back to critical care. But you had to have directors working towards that with the
Mhm.
nurses to help that. So
Yeah.
I don't know who that'd be.
Commander.
It's an incident command phone ringing. So you're it. But yeah, that had to be expensive for you as a director of a unit to take a nurse that you knew you weren't going to be keeping, but yet you saved that nurse for nursing profession. So
That's
Yeah.
huge. The finances of this, go back to that and I'll let Austin talk because I keep hogging.
No, it's okay. I'm an outsider in this as a physician, so I think that this is really helpful for me to hear and to learn from. Um, Two questions I had was, one, what are some proactive ways to address moral injury? Um, and, you know, I know we do debriefs a lot. Um, and certainly having that on the schedule is good, but I wonder sometimes too, our debriefs, can they sometimes backfire on us by becoming more of a complaining session or more of a whatever
Oh, yeah.
it might be? So how do we make debriefs or pre-briefs or briefs work? So that's one question. And then and maybe that's not the right format too. And then two is, um, did you find much evidence that the physician nurse interaction is part of the burnout, and how can that relationship be addressed?
Yeah, so speak of the first one first. I really have a vision. It's very hard for me to know exactly what it will look like. But what I would really like for us to do is have a structured, routine sort of where, you know, we don't have to make it a requirement. We require a lot of outside stuff of all of our providers already, which may contribute to moral injury. But having an opportunity and proving its value where we, you know, on the first Monday of every month and, meeting all the needs of the shifts, right? So however we would do that, have, an opportunity where we come together and it's structured, right? Where it's not just a free for all, you come in and have, say whatever you're gonna say. But we talk, it is a peer-to-peer support. We build each other up, we help each other, instead of just being so reactionary. And I think that something in that arena is where my head is at, how I envision this moving forward. But it would require the buy-in of someone who does have a background, right? And so what's our EAP guy's name? Carlos. He was so beneficial during our emergency meetings, because I felt he knew his place.
Mhm.
He's like, I am not a clinical person. I'm a psychologist, but I can offer feedback. So he wouldn't run the show, right? But he would be there to help moderate a little bit. Or not him, but somebody in that field. You yourself, I think that people in the ethics arena, and then a facilitator like myself, where this is where my passion is, right? And so I'll learn everything I can learn about how to structure something that adds value to practice, and we meet that need in front of, the exit.
Yeah, right.
Whether it's a
Um,
mid-air or a code event or just anything
Yeah,
that, like you said, it's not what we expected to happen.
right.
Because of the
Um,
4 things you listed on that slide, only the 4th one can you take ownership of,
Right.
the second victim.
That's right. You're right about that.
The
Yep.
first 3, that's part of the profession. The 4th one, though, is the one that we need to help people
Yeah.
get through the stages of grief
Right.
to move through that.
That's right. And so to respond to your second question, obviously, the communication, multidisciplinary communication is huge.
Mhm.
And I think that what we saw, that drove us to have our emergency meeting, that breakdown was a big part of that.
Yeah.
And it's not unique to CVICU. I think that having, I think that we've come a long, long way in healthcare is in terms of the hierarchy, right? But at the end of the day, physicians are still the ones writing orders and we're the ones carrying them out. And so there's still an authoritative perspective. And when that is misused or abused, it's one of the primary things that draws people away.
Yeah.
They can't handle it. And I can tell you that from my nursing residents, and that's just in my little room in breakout sessions where they talk about physician X, Y, or Z, and I can never get a straight answer, or they come in and make changes and they don't tell me, or it's terrible.
Yeah.
Because at the end of that event, it's the nurse that's in the hot seat, or the therapist or whoever it was. And it appears to be not enough accountability on all fronts.
Yeah.
And I think if we could improve the communication aspect of that, we would probably solve our own problem.
I'm gonna add a second word, communication and accountability.
Yeah. So that's my response. In terms of finding the evidence, it's out there.
Yeah.
I didn't see that it particularly was, it definitely came into play. I read it in a few of like the very, mostly what I was reviewing were studies.
Yeah.
And so some of it, there was some evidence in there that had to do with the communication, but that wasn't my primary finding, so.
The St. Jude has a RISE program too.
Yeah.
I know you mentioned Hopkins, but.
Well, and so the interesting, because I did see that they were on the list of facilities that had used it. And I'm like, well, not interesting, they're right next door.
Yeah, right.
But every patient they admit is supposed to die, so.
Yeah,
It's hard to go to work every day.
yeah, so I know that they do. I know that I would be wise to find resources next door instead of, flying across the country for resources.
Yeah.
So, yeah, so anything else?
Yeah, I have something to say. Are you with palliative care?
Austin?
Yes.
You talking to Austin? Yeah.
Oh, hey, I'm Dolphine Boywick's mom, so
Oh,
thought I recognized you.
hey, good to
Yeah,
see you.
good to see you, man. But Erin, yeah, I love this topic. I just wanted to comment on differentiating between the burnout and the moral injury. I think that's really key because it seems so superficial when you say burnout. It's just like, oh, you're not, you're having trouble with the job, you're not enjoying it. But the moral injury really speaks to the fact that the professional life is impacting the personal life and their self-worth and value. And that, we have to figure out how people, can thrive in this environment. I don't think nurses don't have the reputation yet, but people know not to go into teaching or education. Like they know it's a no-win situation. It's going to be bad. You're not going to make any money. You're going to be brutalized by parents and by the system. And nursing is still, very attractive and glamorous, I think. And that you don't have a bad reputation yet amongst other professions, like to avoid that group, And I think we're getting there though, especially with COVID and the risk to all the healthcare workers now. It's like you might die in the process. Whereas before it's like that's a really low risk. You don't have to worry about that. But right now with all these reoccurring outbreaks, it's, it's not stable. So yeah, if you can capture the people that are staying and that still find the passion, that's going to be what we need to figure out, because how do they persist and, maintain it? Because it's like, if that's your passion, nothing should deter you from that, when you're called to a profession. So the fact that people are giving up really is saying a lot, because that's more than just burnout, that's really critical. So we got to keep them in. But yeah, thanks for talking to us about this.
Yeah, absolutely, of course.
Don't leave yet.
My bad. Just trying to drop that down. Yeah, thank you, Liz. I know that you have such a heart for nurses. Your involvement in our program, obviously how I know you, it's just very clear to me how, how invested you are in, the healthcare arena. And that's really cool. So, anybody else? I appreciate y'all's attention to this and to me for this required presentation. If it wasn't required, I'd still do it. I'm that passionate about it. I feel very strong that we really need to sort of have an intervention in our own profession here. So thank you guys for listening, and I will have this recording if anybody wants it. I'm happy to share it. I may cut out all of the discussion at the end. I don't know. We'll see how long it gets. All right, y'all. Thank you.
I have to say something really quick before everybody leaves.
Okay.
We didn't get to brag on you enough, Erin. So Erin is the recipient of the 2020 Lowenberg Diversity Award. It's an honor that we give to our nurses who share in that. One of our visions, one of our is diversity, and that we know that Erin sees each person as an individual, each possibility in each person as their individual gift, and is ever caring about all of her peers. And so I don't have the award here with me, but I wanted to make sure that everybody knew about that, and we'll make her carry it around for a week at work so that she can be applauded by her peers. And thank you. We have at least one other graduate of the program, Jennifer Winfield's on. So I want to appreciate her too for her participation and the great chat. She had a chat comment.
Yeah.
So thank you for being you, Erin. And I'm sad to see you graduate, but I know that that's selfish of me. So.
This is lifelong. You can't get rid of me now. Bye.